Welcome to A Day in the Life. For the last couple months, we have been capturing the stories of our family from all over the nation. As during this time, we're spread out, and our circumstances are so different, even though we find ourselves in the midst of the same moment. And today, we have Matt with us to share his story and just what he's been experiencing, what this has been like for him. So Matt, if you would, thank you for being with us and sharing your story. And if you would, just give us a little bit of an intro into what this has been like, because I know your story has been a little bit different.
Yeah, I would say there's been a lot of fluctuation in my story over the last few months. Um, I, I would even start it before quarantine happened. I was working full time in corporate America, and I my company had passed around an offer to for people to raise their hand to be laid off, essentially, and offered packages. And with my skill set, it's very transferable. And so I said, you know what? I can get another job. This is a great offer. Pick me. I'll take it. And so coming into quarantine before all of this stuff blew up, this was like at the end of last year. I raised my hand to say, yeah, sure, I'll give up my job. And little did I know that the world was going to explode in so many ways right after that. And so when we came into this time, I found myself without a job. Companies were stopping their hiring processes, and this moment that I was intending to be very short lived has extended quite a bit. My wife also started working full time in January, and I said, that's fine. I'm going to be off for a little bit, and so in the meantime, I'll pick up the slack at home and with the kids, who at the time were in full time school. And I said, that's fine. I'll play that role. And so, it was going to be for just a couple weeks until I, start up at a new job, and then we'd figure out other arrangements. And so, yeah, God had a different plan. And so the lockdown started, the schools shut down, and my role has been very different in the house during the last few months. I am managing the household in a lot of ways. I'm homeschooling our children and just keeping everything moving in the house. And it's a very different role than I've played in the past. I've always worked a lot of hours, and my wife's had to play that role and really do a lot of behind the scenes action that a lot of it that I wasn't even aware of. And so now I've been learning a lot, and learning a lot about the role that my wife has played for the last 7 years, learning a lot about my children and who they are. I'm learning a lot about myself and what I like doing, what I'm good at, what I'm not good at, especially, and what I'm capable of that maybe I didn't think was something that would fit me previously.
As you've stepped into that, I'm very curious, what has been, and I've heard you talk a little bit about this, what has been the most challenging aspect of that? What has been the most rewarding aspect? Because I've heard you speak, about the reality of both, and I think that's the reality of being a parent. But this is a
Yeah, for
very
me,
unique situation.
yeah, I'd say I actually think that the most challenging and most rewarding are they're both the same thing. It's been it's been handling my kids. So my children, for anybody who doesn't know, both of them have autism. So I have a 7-year-old daughter, Rory, and a 5-year-old son, Clark. And so both of them are, typically in full-time school. They have been since they were 3. They've been in a special needs program at Wallace, and they get a lot of therapy. And their schooling is, they're not doing it by themselves. There's a lot of hand holding along the way.
Yep.
And I was not prepared to take that charge. And so initially, it was a huge burden. And that was how I looked at it. I looked at it as this huge burden that now all of a sudden I had to do. not happy that the school is shut down, before any cases even appeared nearby. Um, but primarily, I think that was because I saw it as this huge new job that I had to do,
Mm-hmm.
that I wasn't prepared for, and so there was a huge learning curve for me to understand my kids and their condition and how to help them learn, how to even just keep them in a happy state. I always had limited exposure to my kids. As sad as that sounds sometimes, like I was working a lot and my wife was there to lead the charge, so I didn't know a whole lot about the programs that they were in, and just their learning personalities. And it took several weeks for me to get up to speed and to understand them. But now, actually, I mean, looking back, like it's been such a rewarding experience because I know my kids really well now, a lot better than I did before, on a whole new level. I've always known them and who they are, and that my son's really goofy, and that my daughter is a huge introvert, and I knew stuff like that, but I've been able to understand a little more about like how creative my daughter is, and how math oriented my son is, and how he loves to draw, but he loves to draw shapes and robots, and I just know little things, little details now about my kids that I didn't know before, and it's been really huge, and I feel like I've become such a better father through this experience, and it was just kind of thrust upon me, and I'm really grateful for it.
Wow. That's powerful. That's powerful. I think that it's going to be interesting when we look back on this in the past. And one of the things that you mentioned, and I think is really uh, underestimated, is what it's been like to be a special needs parent as you move through this, and what homeschool looks like. Because as you said, and my wife's experiencing it as well, because for those of you who don't know, my son has Down syndrome, and so just the fact that usually on any given school day, our kids have 5 or 6 people that are part of that process. And they have not only the teacher, but then they also have the aide that's usually with them, and then they have the different therapists that are coming, and specialists that are working through different aspects of education. And it's been a very interesting time for families in that. But I was actually talking to my boys the other day, and I asked them, how are you going to remember this time? And both my oldest and my youngest said, this has been one of the greatest experiences of my life. And it's just because of the fact that we've been, as families, it's brought us together in unique ways. But then, in addition to that, when it comes to navigating those relationships, navigating the situation, what is your experience of God been like? What does that look like through this? Because obviously there's so much uncertainty at the beginning, and then all of a sudden all of this is kind of thrown at you. And what does that conversation look like?
Yeah, my interactions with God have been just so amplified throughout this time. I feel like God's been preparing me for this season for a while now. I Even just like a year ago, I was so overly focused on work and my own ambitions and money, and just I was really focused on a lot of the wrong things, and not, I don't want to come across like I was just chasing idols, but to a degree they were distractions in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And God's been really working in me over the last year to shift my focus onto things that matter. And so I've been taking small steps of faith, and it's led to larger steps of faith. And so that's really been a help coming up to this season. I might have been going crazy if I hadn't gotten myself into a position, my heart in a position to where I'm ready to let God just lead the way. It's funny. I forget who I was even talking to, but someone was telling me about some of the changes that were going on in their life, and this was in like March, and I was just like, wow, I don't know how they're dealing with that. I'm so glad that we don't have too much change going on in our lives. And I was like, wait a second, we've got insane amounts of change going on in our lives. Between me leaving my job and taking on a different role in the house, and my wife starting a new role, and I tore my ACL in December.
That's right.
December, had surgery, and so I've been recovering from that and getting physical therapy, and so it was just a lot of different things. I've been for anybody who's still like out there trying to look at my picture and like do I know this guy? I've been losing weight for the last few months, and I've lost like 85 pounds, and so that's been a huge transition in my life as well. There's just been so much stuff changing, and it really has required me to just let God figure out all the details. I'm not going to be able to do that. There's so much complexity and variance that are flying around, especially right now. And there's a lot of differing opinions about what's going on in the world, whether it's COVID or the racial tensions, and there's a lot of division, and so it's hard to sort out through all of that stuff. And I just try to say, God will figure out the complicated stuff. I just need to keep pursuing Him, and everything else will fall into place. Most of the things that we concern ourselves with our circumstances, and circumstantial things aren't going to last, and they're not what God consumes Himself with. So I don't need to either. I can let those things succeed or fail, and I won't be any better or worse off for it. I just need to keep following Him and wherever He's leading, and be happy about where I'm at. I think that's been a big part of this, is just with all of the change, I've been really intentional about not focusing on what's lost or what should be, and letting myself focus on what is, what can be, and just getting more excited about things I can be hopeful for, rather than upset about things that would have been nice.
Wow, that's awesome. And seriously, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story and the uniqueness of it, and just how you've experienced God through it.
Thanks. Happy to be here. Thanks.
And for those of you who are watching, thank you for joining us as well. And I hope that today's story is an encouragement that even in the midst of so much change and unexpectedness, that God is working, God's moving, and that you can experience Him in really powerful ways. Thanks for joining us. Have a great day.